Yes.
Yes. Welcome everyone to the Doctor Who panel on retroactive continuity and other changes to the timeline. I'm Andrew Love, the moderator, and let's start with introducing our panelists, starting with Jennifer, I think, since it's her idea.
Yes, this was indeed my idea, and then I refused to moderate because if I'm moderating, there's nobody to tell me when to shut up. I am a lifelong second-generation Doctor Who fan, and also a writer of science fiction and fantasy, but that doesn't really matter right now.
Thank you. All right, Doc?
I'm Doc Coleman. I write a steampunk comedy adventure. I'm also a podcaster and a voice actor, and I've been watching Doctor Who since something around 1976.
Wow.
So.
All right, Thomas?
So I'm Thomas Atkinson. I discovered Doctor Who no later than 1972, and the first Doctor I saw was John Pertwee in glorious black and white. And there were spaceships, and there were aliens, and there were computers, and there was this gentleman in ruffles and lace in the middle of it, and I had no idea what was going on, and it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen.
Excellent. And Brick?
Hi, I'm Brick Barrientos. I do trivia, and for the next time I'm doing it, especially if you're in like New Zealand or Australia or East Asia, is 4 a.m. Eastern time. But maybe if you're actually in Baltimore and Washington, be at 10 a.m. is the next one after that. Anyway, I had first seen Doctor Who, not like most Americans on a PBS station, but actually in the early 70s, it turned up on daytime in the weekdays on the local CBS affiliate, and it was John Pertwee, and I think it was the Day of the Daleks. So it's kind of a different start-off story than most other Americans have who watched PBS and saw Tom Baker or Peter Davison or something.
All right, and as I said, I'm Andrew Love. I've been a fan of the Doctor since, let's say about 1985, so actually fairly recently compared to some of you. And I started out with Tom Baker, like many Americans did. I'm primarily a fan. I have had my first science fiction story published this last week on Daily SF, so I was very happy about that. And my wife is a fantasy author. If you'd like a inexpensive children's fantasy about flying horses, I suggest you check out The Pegasus Potential on Amazon by Pamela Love. And let's open it up and just talk about retroactive continuity. Jennifer, would you like to define that?
I define that as when the show decides that the show is no longer canon. Something happens that re-envisions the past timeline in some way that is obviously intentional, as opposed to a continuity error, which is when they simply forgot.
And of course, Doctor Who has had numerous examples of both. And as a time travel show, it can explain away some of those as legitimate changes in the timeline, but not all of them, perhaps. Would anyone like to talk about what retcon surprised them the most, or is most notable to them?
Well, I'm going to say that the first retcon that I'm aware of in the series, and the first one that as a fan kind of tripped me up, was regeneration as a concept, because the creators of the show certainly didn't know that a few years down the line they'd have to replace the lead actor. And while the idea of the TARDIS changing its appearance was built into the show from the very beginning, and that obviously inspired the idea of the Doctor changing his appearance, it was still something that they really had to scramble for when it came time to recast the lead. And they thought about some other ideas and even experimented with a few episodes of having William Hartnell take a back seat to one of the other companions before they hit on the idea of, could someone else be the Doctor? And I remember seeing photographs of Tom Baker as Doctor Who and thinking, who's this new guy? He's not Doctor Who. I don't understand.
Right. Doc or Brick or Jennifer?
Well, I'm actually going to go way back into the mists of time, because at one point I had, which unfortunately I lost, a VHS tape that had the aired pilot of Doctor Who and also had the pitch pilot of Doctor Who, which does still exist.
Ooh.
And the first retcon in Doctor Who was one line that was changed in the pitch pilot, and it stuck with me, not so much as a trip up, but as a, wow, it's a good thing they changed that. In the original pitch pilot, Susan Foreman says we come from the 24th century. It might be a different century. I'm doing this from memory. In the pilot that aired, she said, we come from another time, another place, which opened the door for the Doctor and Susan not being from Earth, which originally the Doctor was human.
Right. And in
The
fact,
Doctor being an alien is a retcon too. But that retcon that most people, including most fans, don't even know happened, opened the door to so much of what the show became, because they made it vague, which is always good.
yes.
No, the thing that got me was in I'm tempted to say the Doctor Who movie. It was the movie that they produced between the two series.
The eighth Doctor movie.
The Peter Cushing one?
No, not the Peter Cushing one. That was way that was in parallel to the old series. This is
the American movie.
Yeah, is the American movie. They let the Americans have the Doctor Who continuity, and they threw in this idea that the Doctor was actually half human, and it's like,
I know.
Really?
Yeah. I have
that at all.
I have a fanfic for that. I have a fanfic for that statement. The Doctor had just regenerated, and he's somewhat confused, and he's picked up a premonition of 10.5, who is half human. And so he's just misunderstanding his own nature because of the trauma of his recent regeneration. Makes perfect sense.
But yeah,
I know that
that was the worst retcon for me.
Yeah.
At some point, somebody floated the idea that when the Doctor regenerates, his entire timeline regenerates.
Oh.
And so the 8th Doctor was half human on his mother's side, even if the 7th Doctor and the 9th Doctor were not. Which I think is kind of a neat idea. The other thing about that Doctor Who movie, I thought that they were moving towards the Doctor discovering that Grace was his mother, but they didn't go there. So
yeah, that would have been very Marty McFly.
Yeah.
Is there any retcon that worked surprisingly well for you, for any of you? I'm thinking for me, when the idea first appeared that there was an unnumbered Doctor, a war Doctor, I wasn't sure that was going to work, but in the Day of the Doctor that worked quite well. It was a little disappointing that Christopher Eccleston wasn't able to fill that role, but having John Hurt worked out fine. Anything that for any of you?
Well, I mean, I already went back to a retcon I liked that was also tripped me up. But really, the entire establishment of the Time Lords, and particularly some of the stuff in The Deadly Assassin, which people at the time hated. But I had to go there.
I don't know if I knew that the deadly assassin was
apparently, and this was just from me looking up fandom history, apparently it was panned. People did not like the deadly assassin at the time.
Was that where the 12 generations established?
Children, but people did not like it. But I did.
Yeah, that was the one where you had the master who was at the end of his regeneration cycle, and he was trying to use the doctor in order to get control of the matrix, and in order to find the knowledge he needed to get a new regeneration cycle.
Yes, the deadly assassin.
Yeah,
it introduced some concepts that have become very important later.
Yeah, did that include the 12 regeneration limit? Although
it included the 12 regeneration limit, and it also included the concept, which was then forgotten for many years, that it was possible to get around it.
Well, very, very early on, we're just thinking that as long as that show goes on, they'll figure out a way around this regeneration limit.
We knew they were going to figure out a way,
but I'm always amused to hear about episodes that were disliked way before the internet, because I can just see people saying to themselves, darn it, we need to invent a medium where we can express our dislike more effectively.
Definitely a lot faster than writing angry letters to the BBC.
Absolutely. Although I'm sure people did that.
And apparently Chris Chibnall was one of them, I think. I'm not making that up. I think he was one of those angry teen fans at that time.
Yes, we are now well into the era when everyone involved in making the current Doctor Who was an obsessive fan when they were 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 15.
Except for one very important person who was not apparently a fan, Whittaker. Whittaker was not a fan.
Okay.
She's done an amazing job, but she was not a fan before she took the role.
Right. Unlike
Matt Smith was either. But they're good actors. That's what they're supposed to do.
She clearly enjoys it, so. Yeah.
So, gosh.
Yeah, I'm still trying to pick out a particular retcon that I think worked well. And part of that is, if it worked well, how do you identify it as a retcon?
You forget that it was a retcon.
Well, the origin story of the Daleks was retconned to a degree.
Absolutely, yeah.
The genesis of the Daleks doesn't line up one-to-one with the first Dalek story, but it doesn't matter because it was so good.
Right, because Davos is so compelling.
Yeah, and it's more that, oh, here's information that we didn't know, that maybe doesn't necessarily line up with what we thought we knew, but.
Did they have a biological component before that? Did people just assume they were robots? Okay.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Verity Lambert had to fight for the Daleks. I don't know who she was fighting with, maybe Sidney Newman or maybe
Sidney Newman didn't like BBC. Robots.
Well,
but
it was also the fact that the show was originally conceived to be a time travel show to teach kids history, and Verity Lambert came in with this Dalek thing, and everyone was like, what?
That's not
pushed forward, and without Verity Lambert, we would not have Doctor Who the way it is.
Right.
It would be gotten after 2 seasons.
But originally, whoever she was fighting with was against the idea of bug-eyed monsters, and she had to convince them that no, these are people. This is a race of beings that are, they're dangerous, they're antagonists, but they are an alien race and not just monsters.
So but in Genesis of the Daleks, they were basically they were essentially bred to be monsters.
Yes.
Yes. Actually, the biggest problem I have with Genesis of the Daleks is the fact that the Khaleds were so bent on racial purity. The fact that they would accept having their genetic material tortured into trying to determine a future ultimate mutated form. Just seems like, why would they do that? Why would they accept that at all?
Because space Nazis are acceptable things to punch, shoot, disintegrate, and otherwise kill, so we had to make it very, very clear that the Daleks are space Nazis.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not wrong.
Otherwise, having a teenage girl attack one with a baseball bat just wouldn't be great. And it was great.
If you look back at the original Daleks episode compared to Genesis of the Daleks, you've got the Kala people who are all about genetic purity, and somehow the Thals, who lost everything, maintained genetic purity and were able to make drugs that would protect them from radiation.
The way it goes.
Two very different approaches.
Well, it's obvious indication that they're different species.
Right. Let's see. I've got a couple of. Oh, I was going to say I mentioned in the introduction, some retcons you can kind of explain away by being changes in the timeline or just things that happen twice. There may have been two different alien monsters in Loch Ness who inspired the legends of the Loch Ness monster. That's just one of those things that can happen more than once. The dinosaurs are apparently really, really extinct because any number of things keep killing them.
And Atlantis sank no fewer than 3 times.
Right. It kept bobbing back up.
Yeah.
You've got to go to different parts of Atlantis in order to sink. It's a whole continent, right?
Yeah.
Apparently. Yeah.
So that's a perfectly reasonable explanation.
And how many times has Earth been destroyed again? How many?
Always Christmas.
It's been stolen at least twice.
Yeah, it's been stolen at least twice, but it's also been destroyed multiple times, including last season, in contradictory ways that also contradict various other future timelines, including the one in which humans became extinct by breeding with so many other species that there were no pure humans left.
Right.
According
here's a retcon. The first Doctor, not one moment of time can be changed. Not one line.
Yes, not one line.
Unless I really want to.
And then wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. There are fixed points in time, and there are other points in time.
Yes.
Yeah, the amount to which time can be altered changes constantly, and it changed again last season.
And I
Planet
think
whatever, where the Doctor reassures the Doctor, after saying that we couldn't mess with Yaz's past because she might disappear, then goes on to reassure them that the future of Earth is not in fact set. So we actually managed to contradict ourselves within a fairly short number of episodes. So
yeah, so some things you just have to say. The Doctor's smarter than us humans. He understands how all this works, even if we don't.
Well, that's supposed to be a Time Lord trait, right? They have
Yes.
a unique connection to the flow of time.
Yes. Although occasionally other species seem to have the ability to get that ability, which is interesting.
Well, I don't know that so much that other species can gain the Time Lord's ability with time as much as they have other ways to relate to time.
Yeah.
I mean, the carnivores eat it, so.
Right. The androgums appeared to be able to, in danger of being able to get time travel, which would be bad.
and the Daleks have time travel.
Mm-hmm.
Humans eventually have time travel, and at most, you know, the entire time cop thing and Jack Partners, that's human developed time travel.
Yeah, there's a difference between having time travel and
And
What the
being a Time
Gallifreyans can do is they can actually sense disturbances in the flow of time.
Lord. Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that will be an entire other panel. So I'm not going to. I'm going to keep myself from starting.
Yes.
Quick, Tracy.
Andrew to have to tell me to shut up.
All right.
Next question.
Right. Let's see. Have I run out of questions? What retcon would you like to see? What element of the show would you like to see changed, or what facet would you like to be ignored away?
Ooh.
That's a tough one, I know.
Well, I would just jump right into, I guess, where a lot of this goes from is what happened to Timeless Children. All right, me personally, I'll disagree with you here, Jennifer, about the is the Doctor special, because I like that moment when Peter Capaldi said, "I'm just an idiot with a box," and that's it. And he's just another one of the Time Lords. Otherwise, but most of this idea of the previous regenerations of the Doctor just come down to when there are multi-Doctor episodes, then you have to worry about them, and how frequently are those. So most of the other time is just having to deal with whatever the show is going to be this week and what the characters are and what the plot is. And even though I may have a problem with it, it's not going to affect probably the next show I'm watching. So I'm not going to worry about it.
Well, that entire thing with the Timeless Children, if you actually go back to the Deadly Assassin, we demonstrate in the Deadly Assassin that the Master is perfectly capable of making the Matrix say whatever he wants it to. He's really good at hacking that thing. So
Right.
if a future showrunner decides to make that not entirely true, we have a very, very easy solution to that problem. The Master lies all the time.
Right.
Yeah. Well, part of it is with the Timeless Child they set up. He's both telling him the legend is true and the legend is false at the same time. So it's definitely meant to confuse the Doctor.
And the title of that episode is not Timeless Child, it is Timeless Children.
Is it children?
Something going on with that.
Well, I was talking about the legend, not the name of the episode, but
Right.
but I still want them to have it come out that the whole thing is a lie. Now, that still raises the question of why do you have this woman who is obviously a Time Lord in a TARDIS who thinks that she's the Doctor?
Yeah.
And it's actually more fun to think that after the Doctor finally dies, the Time Lords decide that the Doctor had such an influence on the timeline that they still need someone to do that. So they get a volunteer to get mind wiped and get personality imprinted, and they send them out to do stuff. That's so much more better than we found this child, which we can't kill. So regularly we wipe their memory and just have them do stuff for us.
As for something I would like to see go away, that's tough. I mean, there were certain individual episodes I wish hadn't happened, but that's a bad writing thing.
So I will talk about a thing that I wanted to see happen that did not happen. I was hoping that the Doctor would reach the end of his regeneration cycle, and it was time for him to die, and this was it. He wasn't going to regenerate. It was the final end of everything, and the Doctor died and then regenerated and woke up and said, wait, what just happened? I wasn't supposed to regenerate. And then spent the rest of whatever that incarnation was trying to figure out why he hadn't died. And that would have given them, however long that actor wanted to play the part to figure it out.
Yep. Well,
and
my answer to that is it comes back to, Modron undead. I did my sums wrong.
Yeah.
Actually,
Too much time
have it.
energy had to go somewhere.
I have it. It's something that was in itself a retcon that I want to make go away. Rassilon should never have come back.
Ah.
The modern take on Rassilon, the original Rassilon, is the guy who implemented the 12 regeneration limit, trapped people into stone forever for seeking immortality, and then they bring him back and he's about to try and destroy the universe so the Time Lords can ascend. Can we make that go away? Make it be somebody else?
I took that to be someone who adopted the title of Rassilon because he was a megalomaniac.
That I will allow. That bugged me because it did not fit. That bugged me because it was a character. I get bugged more by character changes than by plot and circumstance changes.
Fair enough. Yeah.
The idea when Rassilon came back and it was Timothy Dalton playing him, that filled the fan canon that in fact James Bond was a Time Lord who was too sexually active, so they kicked him out and sent him to Earth, and of course that's why it has to be played by different actors.
Yeah.
And so,
James Bond as Rassilon with syphilis. No.
James Bond is the only Time Lord who's always regenerated because of a venereal disease.
Enough.
Very well.
This is not an NSFW panel, I don't believe. So
very well. I'm having a little trouble with Zoom. I'm afraid if I do anything to fix it, I will drop out. So can someone else look at the Q&A box and see if we find any questions?
We've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first.
No, go ahead, Doc.
The first one is, what do you think of the recent retcon that the Doctor was the first Time Lord that all other Time Lords were descended from?
We partially covered that.
Yeah, I think that we don't know that for sure. The Master could easily have been lying.
My weird head canon on that is that it's not the Doctor who was the first Time Lord. It's the Master.
That fits a lot better in my opinion, because the Master is kind of the whipping boy of the Time Lords.
That's my weird head canon on that. And by the way, I like the previous incarnations of the Doctor. I do not like the Doctor was the first Time Lord. Just saying.
That is an interesting take on it. It kind of gets weird when you look at the Master the way he was in The Deadly Assassin, because that says that, okay, there was an eternal child, it was the Master, not the Doctor, but there was a limit, and he reached his limit. It's still kind of an interesting idea that there might have been one alien creature that had this regenerative ability, and they got it from exchanging some DNA with him, but that still doesn't explain River's song. And I think it's much more interesting, the idea that using Time Lord time travel, especially prenatally, is actually what imbues the cells with the ability to regenerate.
But it was also, I believe, and correct me if I'm misremembering, it was also explained that the TARDIS infused River with Gallifreyan DNA, so it does not actually contradict that. I've actually always preferred the vortex explosion. Now, I could be misremembering, but I do have a memory of something like that being said, and that's why she considers the TARDIS to be her third parent.
That raises an interesting point. Is there a Slovene out there that can regenerate? Because Margaret Slovene was reverted into an egg by TARDIS energy. What is her ultimate fate?
We don't know.
They can always dig that out if they want to.
Yeah.
That's a bit scary.
Theoretically, she was adopted into another well, I don't even know the race name.
Rexicorico-Fallopatorian.
Well, yeah, another Rexicorico-Fallopatorian family who raised her to be a law-abiding member of the family. But
yes.
It's hard to talk about the Slitheen when you remember it's a family name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I prefer their twin planet, Clom. Much easier to say. Who'd want
Okay.
Clom?
Do you want the next question?
Sure.
When a newer showrunner retcons something from an earlier showrunner, do you feel that's good and innovative or disrespecting the history?
It depends on how well it's done, I would say.
I would say that in a show that is as old as this one, keeping all of the continuity the same is not that important, and I have never considered any retcon, regardless, to be disrespectful of the previous showrunner. And I have seen retcons that are disrespectful of people in the comic book world. I have seen multiple, I'm going to retcon the entire previous writer's entire run. That's disrespectful.
Right.
Putting in a retcon is not disrespectful.
And I would say that it would be good and innovative when it's good and innovative, and disrespecting the history when it disrespects the history.
Yes.
Cleverness gets points from me.
When the new series began, they could have explicitly rejected all the past of the show, and I'm pleased that they haven't. I'm pleased that they've been weaving that in more and more. It was several episodes before they openly acknowledged previous regenerations of the Doctor, and I'm glad that they've done that. I forget exactly how long it was.
Oh, I want to say it's that in A Family of Blood, Human Nature.
Yeah,
and the Doctor had a notebook with drawings of the earlier regenerations.
Right, but I think there may have been something before that. In Family of Blood, he certainly shows many of the previous regenerations, but there may have been something before that.
Oh, it should have been something in Chris's run, but
it's not coming to me.
Yeah, it's not coming to me right away.
And there was certainly at least the hint in the first Christopher Eccleston story where he looks at himself in a mirror, and it's as if he's seeing himself in a mirror for the first time.
Right. In fact, that was something that was a retcon I was concerned about. I would have been less happy with a Day of the Doctor that implied that the Ninth Doctor had a companion before Rose. Because it seemed very important to that character that Rose was the first human he was associated closely with.
Yeah.
See, I actually kind of like the idea that he tried to go along without a companion.
Right.
I mean, because the Ninth Doctor is the Doctor who regrets. So he's trying to turn over a new leaf. You know, that's why he's got the all black coordinated outfit. He's got no kind of tie. He's wearing a leather jacket. He's in his rebellious phase where he's trying to do something completely unlike he's ever done before. And the idea that during that time he would try to operate without a companion and ends up plopping down in a place where he gets a companion,
Right.
is actually kind of poetic in that way.
Yes.
Every time the Doctor tries to operate without a companion, bad things happen.
Yes. So, yes.
Okay, so we got a couple more questions.
Excellent.
Has Granddaughter Susan ever been retconned?
No, but she's only been explained in secondary canon. There is secondary canon that names the Doctor's wife and talks about his kids, but there is no, in primary canon, we have no idea how the Doctor ended up with a granddaughter.
Well, it hasn't been named specifically, but the 10th Doctor did say that, I have had children before.
Right.
They
Right.
just didn't go into any details. And
Yeah.
I've always had a headcanon that the Doctor's marriage did not end well.
Well,
because the Doctor was never talked about their spouse ever. So,
and by the time it comes up with the 10th Doctor, he's dealing with the fact that all the Time Lords are dead.
Right.
No, true.
And his wife and his children are all dead. Which doesn't necessarily mean that both things happened at the same time, but you get the feeling that however bad it was for him that all the Time Lords died and he was responsible, whatever happened to his wife and his children was that much worse for him, that much more traumatic, that he's avoiding it.
Well, I mean, the thing is that throughout all of the old series, we have the Doctor shows up with a granddaughter at the start, but throughout the entire old series, the Doctor never mentions having been married.
Right.
And which led to a lot of speculation from a fan perspective that Susan was not in fact his granddaughter, but that was never a retcon, that was fan speculation, it was never stated.
Yeah, but that still fits with it being a traumatic memory that he just avoids.
Yeah, like I said, it did not end well. Whatever happened was not good and may have had something to do with why he left Gallifrey.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he was avoiding his ex, I don't know.
In fact, when we see the Doctor in flashback first steal the TARDIS, Susan isn't with him, which opens the question of when Susan began traveling with him.
That was retconned when Clara tells him in the scene more recently where Clara tells him which TARDIS to take. Susan was with him in that scene.
Oh, okay. I misremembered that then. Thank you. I would be interested to see a return of Susan in some form. I think
Caroline Ford is still with us. Yes.
The 12th Doctor had a photograph on his desk of a young girl that.
Yeah, that was Susan's picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was nice to see. And when the 10th Doctor faced off with Rassilon or pseudo Rassilon, there's a woman on the High Council who is the only one who objects to the way the Doctor is being treated. And I've always wondered whether that was Romana or Susan in some form.
Susan was never shown as ever going back to Gallifrey. I thought that was Romana. I've also heard various other speculation about who that was.
Right.
In the End of Time?
Yes.
In the end of
I've always felt that was Susan.
Mm-hmm.
That it was a much older Susan. It's one of those things that's really kind of hard to tell, because one of the things they brought up in the End of Time was the idea that they were plucking Time Lords out of the time stream in order to bolster their numbers for the Time War.
Yeah.
And even the Master said that even after you got killed, they'd bring you back and make you fight again. And that's why he ran and hid.
Yeah.
All right. Another question?
I got a comment from someone in the room with me who we have been talking about. I had suggested that the 8th Doctor was confused and about his own nature when he talked about being half human. And my wife points out in a written note that when the 9th Doctor regenerated into the 10th Doctor, the first thing that the Doctor says is, "I'm Captain," and then he corrects himself. So he apparently briefly thought he was Captain Jack. So it's possible for the Doctor to be seriously confused upon regenerating.
Yeah, I have headcanon that's caused by the fact that all the chemical memory in your brain needs to regrow after you grow a new brain.
Yes.
And that there were bits that are just not connected for a while, and that's why the Doctor is always out of it for a little bit, because all of their head stuff has to come back together.
Yes, well, his dendrites have to heal.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Right.
My head canon is that regeneration is both a biological process and a skill.
Mm.
And you look at Romana regenerating. Romana really understood regeneration. She was very skilled at it. She could control her regeneration, make it dance.
And she was
doctor
using
can't.
holograms to project all the different forms she was considering between.
And the doctor was absolutely rubbish at regeneration. It's a case of when a regeneration took him, just everything went every which way, and the only thing that really guided his next form was whatever his emotional state was at that time, and he basically becomes the person that the doctor most wants to be at that moment.
Yes.
So that's why you go from Matt Smith, who is basically a child, to Peter Capaldi.
And in The Night of the Doctor, Paul McGann actually says, I want to be a warrior.
Right, and takes chemical and takes medicinal help in becoming what he wants to be, because he can't do it himself, apparently.
And there is the time when the poetry to Baker regeneration with the Buddhist guy, where he actually has external help regenerating because he can't do it on his own.
Yes.
Because he's so badly poisoned.
And when Capaldi, you get to the end of Capaldi's run and the doctor is regenerating, he feels like he's done it all. And what he wants is a new experience. Well, now, boom, the ultimate new experience, your gender's changed. Try it all again from the other side.
Yeah, which is also a big retcon, but it's a retcon that has been in the works at least since Tom Baker.
Yes,
because Tom Baker talked about he in an interview somewhere, and he may have just been joking around, but he said something like, I wish the best of luck to the next doctor, whoever he or she may be.
Right. And in the doctor's wife, the doctor explicitly talks about the
Corsair.
The Corsair,
Yep.
who is apparently equally likely to be male or female.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was seriously considered right before the show was cancelled that if the show had not been cancelled in the 80s, the Doctor after McCoy may well have been a woman. It was under serious consideration. It never happened because somebody at the BBC show decided they didn't want the show to continue, but it was under serious consideration, at least as a possibility.
Right, and the Curse of the Fatal Death also covers the issue. That was parody.
Yes.
The official parody.
Well, it was written by Stephen Moffat, so it's
right. So it's about as
duplicate.
effective as it can be. Are there any other questions out there for us?
We got 3 more questions in the queue right now.
All right, and that'll probably take us to time then.
Okay. The next one is, do you feel that it's inherent that there will be contradictions in a show just because it has such a long history?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's almost impossible to avoid contradictions in a show that only lasts for 6 episodes. You've got so many people working on a television episode. You've got writers, you've got directors, you've got actors, all of whom have input, and something's going to slip past. Yeah.
In fact, you could really say that it would be bad to have a show without any contradictions. You'd be locked into having no ability to say anything at all after about the 5th episode, because you would have tied yourself in knots.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's so many things about the Doctor which are a study in contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
To not have contradictions in the show and exercise that team of writers in figuring out how to get out of them would just be a waste.
Okay.
Next question is, who are all the panelists' favorite Doctor?
Well, now I would like to be the exception to the rule of thumb that your first Doctor is your favorite, but I'm still a great fan of John Pertwee. But it's a question of fine degree. I don't think anybody has done a bad job of playing the Doctor. And I love Jodie Whittaker. And just after all the angst of can the Doctor be a woman, and she literally falls out of the sky, and I believe it from the first second. It's like, yep, she's the Doctor, all right.
My first Doctor was Tom Baker, and I will admit he's high on my list of favorites. But there's really none of them that I dislike.
Yeah, I can't really choose one favorite. I'm a Baker baby, but I've always loved Pertwee. Capaldi had me at kidneys. Whittaker is doing a great job. And the only one I dislike is Peter Davidson, because I have never quite forgiven him for not being Tom Baker. I have second Doctor syndrome, and I freely admit it.
Yep.
Rick?
Even though I'd seen John Pertwee first, I probably saw more of Tom Baker earlier, but then that almost seemed like at the time to be an obvious thing to pick Tom Baker. So I had always said that Peter Davison was mine, and then the new one, Peter Capaldi. So I guess I like the Peters, and I suppose that when Russell T Davies started to put the romance in, and I felt a little uncomfortable, the whole Rose Doctor thing kind of didn't always set well with me. So, but that may be why I wasn't all that keen on David Tennant. And okay, I'll say this. Maybe I don't like Colin Baker, although I understand. I haven't listened to the Big Finish that really redeems him, that I should be listening to those, and he's a much better Doctor in Big Finish in the audios than he is on television.
I thought he was fine on television.
Okay.
He's a fine actor, and he did these just emotional whiplash bits as the Doctor that just had me, had my jaw on the floor. Just how can someone do that? That's amazing.
So I am going to crib a line from the Brigadier and say, the Doctor, wonderful chap, all of them. But I also feel like I want to point out that the best Master was Derek Jacobi, even though he played the Master for the least amount of time.
I would have loved to have seen more of Derek Jacobi as the Master. Absolutely.
Last question?
Last question. Sometimes the Doctor is like a pacifist and claims that he doesn't do guns and won't let companions have guns. Then sometimes the Doctor is shooting and fighting, both Jodie Whittaker and the War Doctor, John Hurt. In the first case, it's like a general rule or code of ethics. How is this explained?
Okay, my feeling, the Doctor is a pacifist for the same reason Vulcans are dedicated to logic. Because when the Doctor stops being a pacifist, bad things happen.
Like the 11th Doctor said, a good man doesn't need a whole lot of rules. And ask yourself why I have so many.
And I encourage people to go out on YouTube and look for well, if you search Doctor Who and guns, you'll find a super cut of all the original Doctors using these massive weapons, blasting their enemies, and it closes with Tom Baker casually breaking someone's neck. And it's the Doctor is a pacifist until he finds himself in a situation when it can't be.
Yeah. We're just about out of time.
Well, I'd like to answer the question.
Yes.
I mean, the Doctor is definitely a character that looks at guns as tools, and the big reason he's really against guns is because a lot of people are of the attitude of, I have a gun, it will solve my problem for me. And the Doctor is very much in terms of, you need to solve the problem first. If you're out of everything else, or if you really need it to get your solution done, you can pick up a gun. But the Doctor always wants to find that alternative solution. And maybe that's part of why John Hurt's War Doctor was so suppressed, because this was a doctor who picked up the mantle of being a soldier and picked up a gun, and the gun was part of the solution. And when it came down to it and things were really bad, the big bomb was part of the solution. And I would say that by the time Jodie Whittaker comes around, the Doctor's gotten some memories back and has learned how to deal with that.
Yeah.
All right, it's time for some final thoughts, and I'd just like to say thank all the panelists, and thanks to the audience. I had a great time just sitting around and chatting about the Doctor. That's one of my favorite things, and I hope to have many more chances to do that in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how many years have we had Doctor Who now? It's breathing hard on 60.
Yeah.
And I hope for as many more.
Thank you all for letting us into your homes and talk about Doctor Who.
Yep. Thanks, guys.